Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Altwire podcast. In this week's episode, we are joined by our special guest, Stephen McKellar. Some of you may know Stephen from his work as the lead singer of Civil Twilight. Now in the midst of his own solo career, Stephen has stopped by to chat with us and promote his new EP, 1 and 0. Hello, Stephen. How you doing this afternoon?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. One of the things I wanted to talk about, I noticed that as part of your journey as a solo artist, you released Ethio, which unfortunately came out in the midst of a global pandemic. Probably got a bit overshadowed, unfortunately, as a result. What was it like releasing that EP in the middle of the pandemic?
Well, I recorded it and then we toured it, actually. My wife and I went on the road and we toured it. And then we were on the road in January. And then we were leaving Seattle as there was talk on the radio of this cruise ship or something coming into the harbor and people being quarantined and stuff. And so we were leaving Seattle at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, oh, good thing we're leaving now. We're getting out of this mess. And then the record came out a few months later and we were in the middle of it. And we thought about postponing it, but at the time we thought, well, it's kind of like the record is pretty dark and it's kind of like, but it's very much about America, about my story in America, some of the characters I've come across. And we just thought, yeah, it's probably a good time to put it out, whether anybody is even going to know it's out. Let's just make it so it comes out now, you know? And yeah, it was really odd. I think it's going to hopefully get more legs. Maybe 10 years down the line. So.
Maybe when you do the anniversary edition in about 10 years or so, right?
Yeah. Maybe a lot of records that came out that first year was 2020, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a lot of those records people will go back and listen to them because there was just so much chaos, so much confusion at the time. I mean, I think a lot of people didn't really know how to approach it, didn't really know what to listen to, you know, as well. They just went back to like oldies or something, you know, or just wanted to feel good. It was a strange time to like try and read the cultural temperature, you know, really weird.
It was kind of interesting on our end, too. We had to completely rethink the way we did everything. We had a couple of concerts scheduled that we were going to cover. And obviously, once COVID hit, all those concerts got canceled. So we had to completely rethink the way we were going to do things on the websites. It was kind of crazy. If you don't mind, I'd like to expand on that and maybe talk about your journey to get to this point, going from the last Civil Twilight show you had in 2020 to releasing Ethio and then going on to the new record now. Can you walk us on how basically the last 2 years have been for you?
Mm-hmm. So are you familiar with the band at all?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So we, yeah, I mean, that was like a good, 5 years ago. That we just decided, we all got a bit burnt out from the road and decided to quit it. So the band split, the label imploded, and I sobered up all in the span of 2 weeks. And, it was like, okay, time for a change. So I did a few things for a few years, playing for other bands and writing songs for other people and stuff. And eventually got around to trying to work out how I was going to express my own thing, which I feel like I'm just kind of getting started in, actually. And the last 4 years has been like experimenting with what I could do outside the band. And I mean, sobering up, you know, after being on the road for like 10 years, took a minute to adjust to things. It's been a hell of a few years, man. And then we moved to California. My wife and I moved to LA kind of in the middle of the pandemic, actually. And so I've been writing a lot of music out here. And I think that's also changed the feel of the writing. But I feel like I'm just, you know how it is. I'm just getting started. I feel like I'm just tapping into like new depths, you know, kind of doing full circle back to a childlike simplicity or something. The wonder of music, the wonder of creation. You know, I'm 40 in a few months' time, and I feel like I've been experimenting in somewhat survival mode, and I want to get back to a little more play in my life, as I think we all do and all need, you know?
Amen.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like everybody's just been trying to survive the last couple of years. We forgot what it meant to have fun and just to enjoy life.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's been, yeah, so much change for everybody in my life. I mean, and to add it, that on top of that, just turning 40, it's a weird thing, man. It's a weird, you feel young, you feel good, you feel strong, but also feel like you've got 40 years of memory and experience and trauma as well
Yeah.
that you're trying to work out. Yeah, so getting back to childlike simplicity, man. That's what I'm trying to do.
You came from South Africa and you've been moving around quite a lot during your life. You went from South Africa to, I believe it was Nashville, if I'm not mistaken. And now you're living in LA. Do you still feel that some of that Cape Town influences and atmosphere still makes its way into your music? Or do you feel like, given everywhere that you've been going, it's kind of like a mixing pot of all your experiences and influences?
Mm-hmm. Definitely a mixing pot, man. I mean, I grew up in South Africa in the 90s, early 90s. I was in my teens, and South Africa was just opening up to the world. And so we were just starting to get more music from around the world for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was pretty obsessed with American music. I was pretty obsessed with, because it was so foreign to me. It felt so like America was the land of Coca-Cola and Nike and Disney. It was like a very magical, colorful land. Obsessed with it. We first moved to LA actually, and then we moved to South Carolina. Then we moved to Nashville, and then I'm back in LA. But we toured for 10 years and all over the place. I think every place in America, especially, I found fascinating. It's definitely influenced a lot of my writing but then all that said, like Cape Town, I go back every year, and I haven't been back in 4 years, and I miss it so much. I realize that more and more, the more I write songs and like dive deeper into myself, that's the air of Cape Town. It's not like it was growing up. It's a different place now. It's still very beautiful. It's still stunning and amazing, and people are still amazing, but it's just a different place.
Would you mind elaborating on that if you don't mind?
It's just it's become more exposed to the world. There's just more tourists, and it's become more globalized, which is really good. It's a good thing. I still don't think it gets enough cred. It's a very confusing place to the outsider because there's so many cultures within it, and there's so many different languages. It's gone through so much change in the last 30 years. I've become more familiar with how the world views South Africa now that I've lived far away from it for a long time. And I can understand how confusing it is to understand. Especially, a white guy from South Africa. We did so many shows in the South when we first started touring. And we'd go through like Pulaski, Idaho or something like that, and pull into a little bar and play, and we would say we're from South Africa, and people would just think we're just
You're taking the piss.
Taking the piss, yeah. And and then I thought that was I was like confused by it for a long time, and also this is back when South Africa was less known in America, and I realized this is actually just confusing people. White guys getting up there playing white rock music, saying they're from Africa. It's like, come on, man, give me a break.
I imagine it must have been a little bit crazy for you guys because in what felt like almost overnight, you guys are on One Tree Hill. You're getting lots of success in America. Suddenly, before you know it, your album kind of explodes. Was it, if you'll pardon the term, kind of a mindfuck to have that happen, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was, and we were ready for it. I think too. Like we've been waiting for a long time, and we've been dedicating ourselves a lot of devotion to what we were doing, without any results for many years. I mean, we slow build, but it was by the time that first song started getting traction on radio and stuff, we had already been in the States for like 4 years, 5 years, bumming around, doing our own tours, getting nowhere really. Like making connections. So by the time that came around, man, we were just so eager to hit the road, and we got a call that let us from the sky was doing well and on the radio, so we just hit the road and we didn't come back for like 2 years. Just toured and toured and toured.
Growing up, you came from a musical upbringing. I know your mom was classically trained in piano, and you did some music with your brother. Can you elaborate on maybe some of the first artists that you were exposed to musically and what really shaped your musical identity?
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to say before what I would call this sort of musical enlightenment of
Yeah.
my 14-year-old self, 13-year-old self, I would say it was just like that music was like this nice thing to put on the background, right? And there was a lot of there's a lot of jazz, there was a lot of opera, but it was all just background music. To be honest, I liked it. I liked the feel. I like what it did to a room.
Yeah.
You know? And when you're a kid, that's all you can really notice. I wasn't drawn to that. I think I wasn't getting lessons or anything. But then when I was 13, I discovered music. I remember hearing Nirvana, like 94, you know, and it was like, I could just see everything. It was my first time hearing something so fucking precise and just like guts, you know? And at the time, you know, it's the 90s, so there's a lot of good, like, Radiohead's coming out with some insane stuff, and The Verve and Oasis and Blur. And there's a lot of bands that came and went too that I was just really into. I mean, then I already got into jazz as well.
I think it's interesting what you say about Nirvana. I mean, there's some purist out there who will say that, you know, Nirvana wasn't the first grunge band and there's a couple bands that came before it. But what I feel Nirvana did so well is that they just made grunge so accessible to everybody else. Like you have the legendary David Grohl on drums. I mean, need I say more? And it was just explosive. And Nirvana really opened the doors for sure.
Yeah, man. It was just pure magic. I mean, for a kid, man, at the time, for a kid in South Africa, he doesn't have access to buying American records. And to hear that on the radio, it's mind-blowing. It was mind-blowing. All the way down there, bro. You know, this guy from Seattle just like totally speaking to me. Like, directly into me, like, oh. Yeah. It was amazing. Amazing.
And, you know, talking about Cape Town actually makes me think of something I wanted to ask you. You made a good point. Not many people in America, unfortunately, know as much about Cape Town as they should. So I was wondering if you'd be willing to go into some hometown pride, maybe tell me about some special places or hangouts that maybe some kid in America, for example, might not know about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I grew up in Hout Bay, which Hout Bay is a little fishing bay, a suburb of Cape Town, and it's on a peninsula. Cape Town's on a big peninsula. There's a lot of little bays and stuff, and so I like to call it like it was like the Shire. You know, it was a very small little fishing town. There wasn't much going on at all growing up there. Nature was everywhere, and nature there is very powerful, and very dominant, and very epic. The beauty is very epic, and the water is very stormy, and it's very like wild, and so I drew a lot from that. And so any places, I wasn't really a partier. I wasn't really into girls like growing up.
Yeah.
I was a nerd, essentially. I just discovered the music, and then so it was nature, music, and I surfed a little bit, and so a lot of places I would recommend going are these little nooks that we would find in caves and mountains and swimming holes, and yeah. But the places to go, I mean, well, I'll give you one. Like Hout Bay links to the rest of the peninsula. It links through a road called Chapman's Peak. If you look it up, Chapman's Peak, Cape Town. It's a very epic little drive. And I'd recommend doing that. But, you know, people are also intimidated by going to Cape Town or South Africa because it's so fucking far. You know, it's like, it's a long flight. And people get intimidated by that. But I've invited lots of people there, and lots of people have gone, and not one of them they always go back.
One of my colleagues, Natasha, actually makes it a mission to go there probably every 5 to 7 years. She loves it. If she had her way, she'd probably live there forever. But, you know, it's a little hard to I mean, you know firsthand, having immigrated to America, it's kind of hard to immigrate from America to South Africa. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, for sure.
Yeah, that is hard. My mother did that, actually. She's American.
Oh, great.
She probably was responsible for brewing a lot of my excitement about America. She's an amazing person and an amazing creator, amazingly free mind, and she was so outside the box there. The sort of British colonial thing that happened, in places like that, where it's very British. The white subculture is very British and a little bit daunchy, puffy, something, stuff. And she was just outside of that. But she moved to America, when she was in the 70s. That's not an easy thing to do, man.
You already have a history of collaborating with your family. Have you ever worked with your mom together on anything? Would you consider maybe having her on a future solo album or Civil Twilight album if it happens?
That is a great idea. I've thought about that, and I think that's something I would love to do. For sure. She plays beautifully. Yeah. Yeah, man.
And you credit her with making you love American culture. How would you describe the differences between Cape Town culture and American culture, having experienced both?
I can't speak to like what it's like growing up there now. Obviously, it's changed so much, the place. But growing up there, for me, the difference is, okay, I'll tell you one huge, huge thing that took me years to grasp when I moved here. So we grew up with a few channels. There was like 4 channels, TV channels. There was some like local soap operas and some local like game shows and stuff, and the local news. And there wasn't very much good local TV. I mean, if you wanted the good stuff, it was American TV shows or BBC,
Yeah.
So anything, and both of those worlds, they didn't relate to our world. I mean, like, there's some American show about a kid living in the suburbs, pushing his skateboard down the street with his Nikes on and bouncing his basketball. That was like so romantic to us. It was a world that didn't exist. We couldn't relate to that. So like growing up, TV, ad, commercials, I didn't feel like they were talking to me. They were talking to somebody else. So that world had no say in my world. It had no influence on me. It was something that was separate. Even movies weren't something that you go and you don't walk out of a cinema after watching a Clint Eastwood movie and then want to be Clint Eastwood. That's just daft. You don't try to take on these fictitious characters because they have no place in your world or something. And when I first came to America and realized that there's like this insanely obsessive, weird, unhealthy relationship between media and culture and society. And it sort of mixes to a degree that we don't even realize what's going on. We watch commercials about shampoo, and the commercials have got nothing to do with shampoo. They're appealing to our sympathetic human nature to sell us something, but we don't really see it that way. We relate. We want to relate constantly to things. And I didn't grow up with that. And so that's a huge difference, I mean, it's like it changes the entire world. So my perspective when I first moved here is, like, oh, who's taking tips from who? Like, I guess it's just all just one thing. But I think that's really helped me in the long run. If that makes any sense, it's helped me.
It does.
It's helped me find my own identity in a place that can be very confusing. Find that.
Americans do have a bit of an obsession with media and the consumption of media. How has our increasingly distracted world changed the way as you work as an artist? Do you feel like record labels are putting too much pressure on young artists to create social media content? And if you do, what do you feel could be a better way to represent their art?
Jeez, I mean, that's the $1 million question, man. Because I know so many artists and musicians and creators that are struggling with this question of where they fit in or how to make it their own. What's nice about where we're at right now, it is a giant clusterfuck and no one's really got any answers. And I think that's great. Like, it's a good place to start because I think it's the blueprint. It's the old blueprint just crumbling and doesn't exist anymore. And unfortunately, who's going to create the blueprint is usually companies with the most money, and it's a capitalistic society, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make it a living, but yeah, it's a tough one to navigate. I mean, I'm working that out every day. I do think that I was talking to my wife the other night. Someone told me about a crazy stat. I don't know what the numbers were, but there's tons of TikTok superstars that have like gone missing or been, or like that have committed suicide. I was just like, oh, I heard this, and I was like, really, that's kind of strange. I looked it up, and I was just like, I don't read the news. I don't look at anything I'm not interested in. I don't take any information from anybody. I don't like that. I find it myself. I find it through people, and if it's wrong, it's wrong. I don't really care if I'm wrong. It doesn't. I just try to keep my head clear of anything. But diving into this article was fascinating, and we were talking about how this next generation doesn't know anything else but this, and how much we're going to start seeing repercussions of that later on. I think there's going to be movements going back to purity in the sense of like, it's going to be movements going back to minimalism, not in the nomadic sense that we've seen, but more in like the lifestyle. I think that is starting to happen.
One of the questions I was planning to actually ask you about, but I feel like this might be a good time to bring it up. Chester Bennington, you performed at the Hollywood Bowl concert. I was actually there. I saw you perform. You did an amazing job.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I was actually in the orchestra pit, and I had known about you guys from when we did an interview with Richard back in 2016. And Mike Shinoda goes, hey, here comes Stephen McKellar from Civil Twilight. I'm like, no way. Tell me a little bit about how that came together, what the experience was like, and maybe afterwards, if you could just let me know how Chester impacted you as a musician.
Yeah, that was crazy. We actually met Chester. This is wild, man. So we met Chester when, I think it's in 2004, 5. We just moved to LA, and we booked our first show at a club. I think it was the Roxy. It was like a friend of ours, it was a bartender there or something, and got us a gig there. And he was at that show randomly.
Nice.
Yeah, just like hanging out. He liked our sets. He like bought us drinks and talked to us a little bit, and we were just like, imagine kids from South Africa, man. That record at the time was just worldwide. It was absolutely massive, And so our first gig at the Roxy, here's Chester, just hanging out. We thought, maybe, is this how it is? Like, is this normal? But then, years later, Mike Shinoda emailed me and said, do you want to be a part of this thing? When Chester was really influenced by your vocals. Eventually I worked out that it's his son that turned him on to us.
Oh.
And his son and his wife requested that I go out and sing. But I don't know if he'd ever made the connection between that band he saw at the Roxy and the band, maybe I think probably 7 years later, something like that. I don't know. But that's how it went down. It was very, that was a very amazing experience. I flew my wife and I out there to do this, and it was like, they are the sweetest, hardest working, just like solid dudes. And it was so kind. I was sick as a dog.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this too. That we're busy rehearsing for this show. I'm still in club mode, right? So like, if someone's sick on the road, you just kind of suck it up and deal with it. If the 2 of the crew members or 2 of the band members get sick, you just do the show anyway. It's not going to affect anything. You might lose like $20 or something if you don't do the show. But I didn't realize with this show, man, if they can't do this show, like, if they get sick and they can't do it, it's like 20,000 people or something stupid. I don't know how many people are there. So I'll go there to the rehearsal. I'm sick as a dog and I'm sniffing all over the place, and they're just like, anyway, it was so embarrassing afterwards. I realized what an idiot I was going to this rehearsal sick, and like, eventually, like, there was like, the Korn guys were there. Everyone was there, all hanging backstage. I hang in this green room, and I'm sick. And the news got around really quickly. It was like, that guy's fucking sick as a dog, man. Stay away from him. Eventually, they just like, don't rehearse any songs. Just go home. We just don't want you. We don't need you around. You're sick, you know? Oh, it's so embarrassing. I was like,
and this was pre-COVID too. Can you imagine if this was during COVID?
Oh my gosh, no ways. Yeah. And also it was my first time singing in front of anybody sober.
Nice.
And that was like, I mean, I'd done almost every show I'd done, I had some sort of buzz happening or completely out of my mind. So the first show I ever do, you know, first show in like, I don't know how many years doing sober, it's in front of 20,000 people at it. The Hollywood Bowl. Oh man. Anyways.
I believe in my research, I think your first solo EP was called David. Is that correct?
Yes.
What did you learn from creating that solo EP, and how did it change you as an artist compared to when you were working with your other band members?
It's a good question. I've been writing songs on my own for a while, but I'd bring them to the band and we'd rework them, and it was a democracy. You know, we came with a lot of things together, and I wasn't afraid I knew that I could do it. I just relied on the feedback and the response of people so much for so many years. And it was the first time where I didn't have that. I didn't have any wall to bounce anything off of. So the decisions all came back to me, and that was extremely liberating and also very terrifying. And so I had to experiment with that, you know, so I had to like break things down to guitar vocal, piano vocal, and then also tell myself, okay, what if you did have fucking orchestra and like 5 drums, you know, what if you did go there, you know? So I tried a bunch of different things, and I'm still experimenting. I do now crave and miss collaboration a lot. I know that there's a magic that happens that's impossible to emulate on your own. It's just, I mean, that's what music's all about. Hey, I mean, that's our communication together, and I miss that a lot. But I also starting to write on my own. I mean, it begs the question, well, what are you going to write about? Because you're singing, you know, you've been singing the whole time, but now you're representing just you. Like, what is it you want to say? I think that's also something I'm trying to work out all the time and get deeper into. And I think the depth of that is kind of infinite. You know, what is it how do you feel on the day to day about being a human being? What are your true thoughts on that? And what would you want people to hear? Not even that. It's just, what do you really think? What do you feel? It's a lot of diving in there, you know?
How would you say that you've grown as an artist between your first EP to where you are now? What are some of the things with the new album you feel are different and have helped you to evolve as an artist?
I've definitely become better at making my own records. The engineering side, and mentally not putting myself through as much anguish, not purposely torturing myself. Hopefully I'm learning to get more precise in what it is that I'm feeling and what it is I want to say. And letting things flow. I think I'm still so bound in that, man, to be honest. I've still got so much to go, so long, so much to explore in terms of my own curation. When you're making stuff on your own, you realize how you get familiar with a deeper subconscious pilot that's happening, that's operating. Perfectionist. Some people have a perfectionist thing. I certainly have this need and desire, insecurity, essentially, to want to be impressive. And I hate that term, and I don't want to be impressive. I want it to be me. And I think I'm in the middle of breaking that down more. But so far, the journey has been amazing, and I'm very proud of my explorations.
Honestly, I think all artists have a little bit of insecurity. I mean, let's be honest, you don't want to suck. You don't want to release music that,
oh my gosh, yeah,
people aren't going to like. You can love it as much as you want, but I think it's one of those things where it doesn't matter how much you like your own music. There's always that needing, that yearning to be heard and appreciated and loved, So it's one of those things where it's probably kept a lot of artists from releasing some music because their own inner demons say, this sucks, I'm not putting this out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're all hungry for that. We're all hungry for that approval. That's human nature. But yeah, yeah, it's an amazing journey, man. Because I was gonna say with the band, you just when you were three guys singing and playing, it's like you're putting out constantly, but you also constantly you got your feelers out for responses, for spiritual and emotional responses from people. You sing a note and you can feel the response, and you're like, yes, okay, that I must follow that down, because that's making people feel something. But when that's gone, you have to ask yourself, what is it that I feel? What is that's turning me on and shifting something within me? Sometimes when older you get, that question can be very hard to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in your journey of self-expression, one of the things I really, really liked, going back to a previous EP that you did, during Ethio, you made some gorgeous paintings and soundscapes, which I thought was a very creative way to handle an album. What are some of the ways that you feel paintings express yourself that you feel music cannot? Have you ever maybe created a painting that you feel like you needed to describe with a song?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, well, I rediscovered painting around Ethio around that time. It's been an amazing teacher for me, man. Having something that is like very unexplored and that I can apply a lot of the things that I've learned in music to this new thing, but on a whole different level of freedom. Like I don't have as much history to have to wade through.
Yeah.
So I found that sort of sharpened my intuition to the things that I am really feeling. It really helped with that. And man, I've tried, like, I'm still on this journey of meshing those two worlds. I have all these ideas in my head that I want to try eventually. The storytelling aspect. I mean, the storytelling potentials of those two, visual and music combining. It's just like, wow, I think that could be really fun. But I'm just getting started with that. But so far, yeah, it is interesting. Two different feelings you get when a painting hits and then when a song hits. Two different feelings. It's very hard to describe it. I'm on that journey, man. I'm gonna see what happens.
On your new EP, which of the songs do you feel is the most fun to create? And branching off of that, which one means the most to you?
Gosh, well, they all have a place in me for sure. I know that sounds cliche, but they're all very personal observations of what it is that I'm going through at changing cities and looking at what's changing within me and also growing older. I mean, one of the songs is called Fading In, Fading Out. It's, it's very personal. I'm kind of in most likely the middle of my life. And it's just like, just kind of wild. And, but I'm just beginning as an adult, essentially. And so the question is like, am I fading? What's fading in and what's fading out? It's a whole lot of things fading in, fading out constantly on a daily basis. I feel like a lot of the confusion of my 20s and 30s is fading into something.
Yeah.
It's disappearing, but into what, I don't really know. I think a lot of the record, a lot of the CP and stuff that's going to come out in the near future, it wrestles with that idea of this time in my life and age and connection with childhood, what you take with you, all that stuff. Saying it sounds just so plain, but that's a lot of what it is. Yeah.
I don't think it sounded plain at all. I think it sounded from the heart. So
good.
What would you say going forward? What are you the most excited about?
I'm excited to do some more collaboration. My wife and I are definitely going to dive into some music together, and we're always making things together, but that's something both of us would love to explore more. I'm really excited about exploring more avenues of expression, obviously, within music and painting. I don't have any idea what that looks like And that's what's really terrifying and exciting for me. In the next few months, I feel like there's a change happening. And I feel like I want to change the way, I definitely want to change the way I perform shows and like where I perform, you know, because yeah, I'm just done with the club thing. I'm just done with that, the whole old school setup. I would love to try something that's a little more challenging and a little more challenging for people as well
Yeah.
to be a part of. Something that involves people. It involves cooperation of some kind. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but that's certainly something I'm excited about exploring. I'm in LA right now, then I'll be in Colorado, then I'll be in Europe, then I'll be in South Africa, then I don't really know where I'll be. So that's another thing I'm excited about. It's traveling, but also my life right now. I have no idea what's up ahead. And I kind of like that.
Is there any closing comments you want to make? Anything you want to share with maybe the fans that have followed you through your entire journey? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. The few that have stuck, have stuck with keeping tabs with me, I really appreciate that. I mean, yeah, I'm really grateful for that. I'd like to say, I'm just getting started.
Good.
I feel like there's a greater story, you know, in all of this, that in my life and in everyone else's lives involved in mine and the people around me. And in your life, you're part of that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I have this thing in me recently where it's just like, it's another cliche, which is keep seeing, keep going. This idea of like, the idea of keep going. Like I've struggled with that for so many years because we get so dramatic and romantic about the things, our desires, you know, and get detrimental and we want to give up a lot of times. But what I'm discovering is like, we all owe it to ourselves, but also to the story of life to like see where these desires lead. And I want that for everybody who's following me, who I'm following, who I'm fans of, who's fans of me. We're all part of that story. So I hope to live a great story. And I hope everyone else has the same.